welcome. Welcome to tonight's special briefing about our 31 in-riding local polls. Before we get started, as some of you know, David Suzuki recently joined us on the campaign trail in London, Toronto, and Winnipeg. He was so excited about our campaign that he actually volunteered to come to another event with us in Vancouver. So before we get started, we want to share a special message with you from David Suzuki.
To all of you that are volunteering and involved in the campaign in the way that Leadnow is now pushing, thank you. Thank you for doing what is my job and the job of all Canadians. That is getting people out to take part in the democratic process and to make sure that the votes matter in a way that will affect the government and the future of our children. Thank you for taking the time and putting your body on the line by getting out at the grassroots.
To find out what's happening in your riding, go to votetogether.ca, enter your postal code, and sign up. Okay, great. Welcome. My name is Amara. I'm managing Leadnow's election campaign, and I am so pleased to welcome you to tonight's special briefing on our in-riding polls. We're going to get started in just a second. Tonight, I'll be giving you a brief update on how today went, and then going over to Matthew, who's our Director of Engagement and resident polling expert, to take us through the 31 brand new riding level polls, and we're going to leave plenty of time for questions. So throughout the night, if you have any questions, just send an email to Leadnow@Leadnow.ca or tweet with the hashtag #VoteTogether, or you can leave a comment on the YouTube video page. So again, if you have any questions, you can email us at Leadnow@Leadnow.ca, or you can tweet with the hashtag #VoteTogether, or you can leave a comment on the YouTube video page. We have Jack, who is our national organizer, going through and curating your questions, and after Matthew reviews our polling results, he'll be passing on questions to us so we can answer them for you. So all in all, tonight's briefing will probably take about an hour, and we'll get started now. I just want to give you a little bit of a sense of what happened today because it was so incredible. So far, today has been the biggest day in the biggest election campaign that Leadnow has ever run. Actually, the biggest campaign that Leadnow has ever run. It has been pretty incredible. We kicked off the day by releasing 31 riding level polls. This is on top of the 13 riding level polls that we released last August. All of these polls were funded by people like you. In our latest round of polling, almost 3,000 people came together and pitched in a little bit to help fund this crucial sorry about that, this crucial in-riding information that's going to help us make good decisions on election day. Today, over 60,000 people went to votetogether.ca. Just to put that into perspective, over the course of this entire campaign, since votetogether.ca launched on August 20th, over 230,000 people have come to the website, and 60,000 of those were today. We have over 67,000 vote pledges across the country, and 2,000 of those came in today. We also have 182 new volunteers who signed up today, and that's on top of the over 2,000 people who've already raised their hands and signed up for shifts to make phone calls from home into conservative swing ridings, and who've signed up to go canvassing multiple times a week in conservative swing ridings that are going to ultimately decide whether or not Stephen Harper wins. For those of you who pay close attention to social media, I'm very pleased to tell you that over 1,000 mentions of the hashtag #VoteTogether were on Twitter today. Just to put that into perspective, our second biggest day was last Thursday when we did a bunch of social media around the Globe and Mail debate, and it was half of that. Also, if in the next hour 1,000 of you ask questions, we can double that. I don't know if you can hear the awkward laughter in the back. Okay. Finally, we've been all over the media today. We were in the Ottawa Citizen, the Huffington Post, the Chronicle Herald, the Winnipeg Free Press, and the Globe and Mail. Many outlets were writing about our 31 in-riding polls. And speaking of the Globe and Mail, tonight, A reporter from the Globe and Mail has been canvassing with our team in Kitchener I heard from Corrigan, our field organizer there, that there were so many people canvassing that they ran out of canvas kits. They're out in the streets right now, and that is just one of many canvasses that are happening across the country. Last week, I know that we ran out of vote pledges at the farmers market in Fredericton, and there's a group of people in Guelph who are self-organizing and have already collected hundreds of vote pledges and raised thousands of dollars for local polling. It's pretty incredible, and there's a ton of momentum across the country. So thank you so much for everything you're doing. It has been incredible to watch the photos pour in and to see all of the website counts. It's really, really great to see all of the momentum across the country, and it's so exciting, and we're so grateful, and I'm really glad that you're with us tonight. Before we pass it over to Matthew to take us through the polling, I just wanted to mention a couple of things about where we are in the election right now. There are 26 days to go in the longest, most expensive, and for many of us, the most important election campaign in Canada's history. In the last 48 hours, something really interesting has happened. Both Justin Trudeau and Thomas Mulcair have come out and said that they would not prop up a Conservative minority government after the election. Now, the fact that both of them have committed to this on the record increases our chances of defeating the Conservatives. It also sends a very clear message to party leaders that they're hearing that we want change on October 19th. We're going to do everything possible to defeat the Conservatives on October 19th, and if necessary, we're going to hold the parties to their commitment to help defeat the Harper Conservatives in Parliament after the election. Another thing that's really important to remember to ground our understanding of these 31 riding level polls is that nationally, we're seeing a strong, tight, three-way split in the polling. So now, more than ever, especially over the next 3.5 weeks of this campaign, it's really important for us to understand what's happening at the riding level and to get ready to vote together for change on a riding-by-riding basis. It's really great that we have this kind of information available to us, but let's keep in mind that we're not the only ones. You can be sure that the Conservatives are putting their resources behind identifying ridings and figuring out how to split the vote so they can come up the middle and win another unfair majority government. So the next few weeks are going to be critical for this campaign. This is the time to build up our local teams and to prepare to get out the vote in record numbers. Okay, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Matthew, who's going to take us through what we found in our 31 riding level polls.
Hi everyone, I'm Matthew. I'm Leadnow's Director of Engagement. I'm coming to you this evening from Nelson, British Columbia. I wanted to start off with there's been a number of questions that have come up during the day about kind of our polling in general as we released 31 riding level polls. That's something that really no independent organisation has done during an election campaign before, so it's created quite a stir. A lot of people have been asking, why have you been polling? What's the methodology? How do you know that polling works? So I wanted to just address a few of those things before we start. We're doing polling to try and give people in the ridings, people like yourselves, in key swing ridings all across the country, the best local information possible, so that they can decide which candidate is best positioned to defeat the Conservatives. We know that the national polls are a three-way race at the moment, and that just doesn't give people the information that they need in order to make that local decision. Who do I vote for to defeat the Conservatives? So what we're doing is we've been doing these riding level polls, and now 31 of them all across the country. We needed a method that would enable us to scale up and do this in lots of locations. So we talked to a number of pollsters, and what we came up with was, it's called IVR, Interactive Voice Response, and that means that automated phone calls went out to people in all of these ridings, asking them to, for example, press 1 if you plan to vote for the Conservative candidate. So that's the methodology that we used. We had about 500 to 700 people in each riding respond, and that's quite a large sample size. Typically, if you see a national poll on the news, that's going to be 1,000 to 2,000 people. To get 500 to 700 in a single riding is quite a large sample size. And then the other piece that I wanted to talk about just before we get into the detailed results was what the questions were that we asked. The main questions, of course, were around people's vote intention, and there were actually two questions about that. We asked people who they plan to vote for, and then people who said they were undecided, we asked them, are you leaning in a certain direction? And the numbers that we're going to present tonight are both of those two questions put together. We had a number of questions come up through the course of the day on Twitter and elsewhere with people asking, well, what about the undecideds? So I'm going to let you know about those off the bat before we get into the detailed results. After the first question, typically we had about 14% undecided, and after the second question that dropped down to 7%. So although the numbers that I'm going to tell you about the different ridings don't have those undecideds in there, they are there, and it's worth remembering that some people will be making up their mind right up until election day. So with that bit about the methodology covered off on, the first thing I want to talk about is what did we find out all across Canada in these 31 ridings. There's two key things. First of all, a clear majority of Canadians want to see change in this election. In every single riding, we saw a majority of voters saying that they didn't want to see the Conservatives get back in. The other thing that's really important to note, and a question that we asked that isn't standard in polls that are done all the time, this was a specific question we put in for our polling as part of our campaign, is would people be willing to switch their vote? And the amazing thing, and we saw this in our last round of polling and then again this time, was that 60% of non-Conservative voters told us that yes, if they were given compelling local information that made the case for that another candidate was best positioned to defeat the Conservative, they would be willing to switch their vote based on that information. Excuse me just a sec. So that really just for me makes the case for why this campaign is so important. We've got these ridings all across the country where vote splitting played a key role in Harper winning his majority last time. We've got a majority change, and we've got them willing to change their vote in order to make it happen. The piece that we then have to add on to that is getting the information into the hands of voters in those ridings so they can make a decision. That's where our campaign comes in. So I'm going to move on now to talking about what we found all across the country. I'm going to break it down by regions and try not to spend too long in any one spot because we've got 31 riding level polls. Obviously, it's a lot of information. So I'm going to give a brief overview of what we found in each region. If you want to get more into the detailed results, most of you will have seen our blog post that we put up today. There's links on that link to the slides that have the information about each specific riding. If you're extremely keen, there's a 400-page report that details all the breakdowns of every single riding in the country and all the questions that we asked. So that information is out there. I'm just going to go through some of the top-line summaries now. So I'm going to start off on the West Coast. In BC, we polled in 6 ridings, 2 of them on the island. The Vancouver Island is an interesting place right now. We found in all of our 6 ridings in BC that it looks like the NDP is probably best positioned to win. In North Island, Powell River, it's looking like quite a clear NDP Conservative race with the NDP well ahead at the moment. In Nanaimo, Ladysmith, that's actually quite an interesting riding. The NDP are still ahead, but the Greens, actually according to our polling, are now up neck and neck with the Conservatives in that riding. Vancouver Granville is one of our target ridings where we've got teams on the ground that have been working for a very long time. That's still a fairly close race. Mira Orek, the candidate for the NDP there, is ahead by 6 points. We saw that in our last round of polling, but it's tightened up a bit. The Liberals have picked up since our first round of polling in August. In Port Moody, Coquitlam and Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge, we see a fairly similar result, with the NDP ahead of the Conservatives by 6-7 points. The final riding in BC is Kootenay-Columbia, which is my riding. It's neck and neck at the moment between the Conservatives and the NDP. And I was joking to my team when we first saw these results that I shouldn't be talking to all of you this evening. I should actually just go out and knock some doors. It's knocking doors that's going to make the difference in a lot of these ridings. And so if you have a chance to sign up with a local non-profit or a team that's doing that kind of work, please go and do it. Moving on into, there was one riding that we polled in the territories, it was the Yukon. Some of you may remember it was a significant vote split in the last election. It's looking now like the Liberals are going to be best positioned to win that riding. We had the Liberals at 39%, and actually the Conservatives slipped down into third, basically within the margin of error. The Conservatives tied with the NDP. You'll have to excuse me for taking a sip of water. It's a lot of ridings to go through. Moving on to the prairies, we had a mix. There's 2 ridings in the prairies where it's looking like the Liberals are going to be best positioned to defeat the Conservatives, and 2 where it's most likely to be the NDP. That masks a few interesting stories. We polled Calgary Centre in our first round of polling in August. That's tightened up. It's actually looking like the vote that's opposed to the Conservative there seems to be coalescing behind the Liberal candidate. In Saskatoon University, we've got a neck-and-neck race. That's got a lot closer. In our first round of polling in August, we actually had the NDP ahead a little further. Winnipeg South Centre, the Liberals are looking fairly clearly ahead there, and in Elmwood Transcona, that's another one that's tightened up. We had the NDP ahead in August, and that's now got the Conservatives ahead by 2 points, which is within the margin of error, so basically a tight race there. Moving on to Ontario, we've got a lot of ridings in Ontario. I'm going to sort of break them down by region a bit as best I can. Starting off kind of in the southwest, there's London North Centre, which is currently neck and neck between the Liberals and the Conservatives. Cambridge is showing that the Conservatives are actually ahead there, with the Liberals in second. That was a little bit of a surprise. Some of the projections that we've been seeing from 308 and other sites would have suggested that the NDP might be up a bit more there. In Brantford-Brant, it's looking like a real vote split there at the moment, with the Conservatives at 39, but then the NDP at 30 and the Liberals at 25. We're really hoping that the voters in ridings like that will be able to vote together behind one candidate, so that we can defeat Conservatives in those kinds of situations where there's a lot of vote splitting going on. Similar vote split in Kitchener Centre. Unfortunately, we polled that in August and saw a 3-way split, and it's still there. It's a neck-and-neck 3-way split. Doesn't look like it's breaking in any particular direction at the moment. So that's going to be one where our team that's going on the ground there doing a lot of work is going to have their work cut out for them in the final stretch of this election campaign. In Waterloo, not far away, we're seeing the Liberals up. That was fairly expected. And in Guelph, which we polled, I just lost my screen. Can you guys still hear me? Somebody on the other end nod if you still got me. Okay. I lost one of my screens, but apparently I'm still on, so that's okay. In Guelph, we're seeing the Liberals actually up by quite a lot. There was something interesting. There was a poll that was done just before the writ that showed a different story and had the NDP up. So it seems like either that might have been an outlier, or possibly things have just shifted in that intermediate 5-6 weeks. Moving on into the Toronto area, team in Eglinton Lawrence, it's a very close Liberal Conservative race at the moment. Liberals at 40%, Conservatives at 38%. In Eglinton Lawrence, we now actually have the Liberals ahead by a whisker. That's Joe Oliver, the Finance Minister's riding. In our last round of polling, we had him ahead by a little bit, and now we have the Liberals ahead by a little bit. So it's looking like that's going to be neck and neck to the finish, but there is a chance that we could actually unseat Joe Oliver, the Finance Minister there, if our campaign can play a role in coalescing the vote in that riding. In Willowdale, we've actually seen the Liberals' lead increased. That hasn't changed much since August. Moving on to some of the sort of more outlying areas in Ontario, Sault Ste. Marie, we're seeing a 3-way split, which was a bit unexpected. At the moment, we have the Liberals ahead, but only by a few points. Essentially, it's a 3-way race within the margin of error for our polling, which the typical margin of error is about 4% on these riding level polls. Bruce Gray, Owen Sound. We were very happy to be able to poll that riding at the last minute. There was a group of concerned Canadians that got in touch and said, hey, we can raise the money for this poll. So that was actually one that we added in very late in the day, and it's something that we're hoping to do more of if groups of concerned Canadians can come forward with the money elsewhere in the country. Those guys came forward and said, hey, can you poll the riding? We added it in. It does show that the Conservatives are ahead by a fair margin, but they're down significantly from the 2011 results. So their local instinct there that something was afoot in that riding and that it might be possible for the Conservative to be beaten looks right. Currently, it's split between the Liberals and the NDP, but there's a number of weeks left to go in the campaign, and it's possible that folks up there could rally behind one candidate to defeat the Conservative there if they're only going to pull in low 40s% of the vote. In Niagara Falls, we've got the Conservatives at 42%, and the opposition vote, unfortunately, fairly split neck and neck, again within the margin of error. We'd hope that there might have been looking like a breakthrough there. At the moment, we're not seeing it. Then moving on to there's some folks in Ottawa with Ecology Ottawa. I bet some of them are listening in tonight that are doing great on the ground organising in the Ottawa area. We'd initially planned to poll 2 ridings, Orleans and Ottawa West Nepean, where those teams are focusing. Both of which currently show the Liberals ahead. Orleans by a substantial margin, Ottawa West by a relatively small margin. We were able to, this was another example, we were able to add in 2 more ridings relatively late in the day, in no small part because of concerned Canadians coming forward and saying, hey, we should poll this riding as well, and helping donate to make that happen. So we added in Nepean and Kanata Carlton, and both of those are showing the Conservatives ahead, but a fairly tight race within 5-6 points in both of those ridings that originally we would have expected to see the Conservatives well ahead in. So some movement in the Ottawa area there. Finally, moving on to Atlantic Canada, we polled 4 ridings out there. There's the regional polls in Atlantic Canada show the Liberals are up quite significantly. We saw that in Central Nova and Cumberland Colchester, with the Liberals having a fairly significant lead. A smaller lead for the Liberals in Fredericton, but with a fairly strong NDP vote in third at the moment, and St. John Rothesay is even closer still. It's about 4 or 5 points difference between the Conservatives and the Liberals there. So that's Atlantic Canada, and I think that brings us to the end of all of our 31. If you followed through on all of that, congratulations, because that was a lot of information packed into a relatively short period of time. Like I said at the start, we've got individual slides with the results for every riding on the blog post on votetogether.ca. So if you're wanting the results for an individual riding and you haven't seen them yet, you can find them there, including the detailed breakdowns of the demographic questions, and for the data nerds out there, more information than you could possibly wish for. With that, I'll pass it back to Amara and look forward to getting into some of what I have no doubt will be many interesting questions.
Thanks, Matthew. That was great. So John and Kelly and Jack have been curating questions for us, so I'm actually going to kick off this part by passing it back to you with the first question. Before I do that, just a reminder to everybody that if you have questions, you can submit ways. First, you can email us at Leadnow@Leadnow.ca. You can also tweet your questions with the hashtag #VoteTogether, or you can post them on YouTube in the comment section. And a few of us are curating questions, and we're going to try to answer as many of them as possible. We still have about half an hour left, so we might be able to get through a fair number of them. Yeah, Matthew, back to you. The first question, which I'll read for you, has been coming up a lot. There are a number of people wondering why we didn't poll in their riding. Yeah, so we were basically limited by a couple of things. One of them was just
like straight up was money. It's quite expensive to do this kind of polling, and we did a lot of crowdfunding to make these 31 riding level polls possible. If there's any folks listening there that have got a spare $100,000 or so to throw at our campaign for the last round, we'd love you to get in touch, and we could poll a lot more ridings. But we were limited because our funding comes from our community, and so despite our valiant efforts, we were only able to fund 31 polls. In terms of how we chose those, we focused on a few things. First and foremost, the ridings where we've been campaigning for the longest as part of this campaign, where we have active teams on the ground, places like Vancouver Granville, Kitchener Centre, there's 11 of them in total. We wanted to make sure that the teams that are doing that really deep on the ground organising have good information for this part of the campaign. Beyond that, we tried to scale up as best we could. First of all, we went into places where we have at least 500 pledges on our Vote Together pledge. We wanted to make sure that we rewarded people that have been doing a lot of work in their ridings, going door to door and signing people up, and that we would focus resources on ridings where we're going to have the ability to shift things by communicating this polling information to people in those ridings that could actually make a difference. So we went to places where we had numbers on the campaign, and also in many of those places we crowdfunded locally to help cover the costs of the polling. Beyond that, there were really just two things. We had a little bit of room left in our budget to add in a few more ridings, so we added in some ridings where we thought that local polling might present very, very meaningful and useful information. So basically places where we suspected there would be a significant vote split. An example would be Brantford-Brant in Ontario, where we've seen vote splitting in a number of elections in a row, and we're seeing that again now. So places where we believe that there will be significant value to us doing the polling. And finally, as I mentioned a few times, there were some ridings that people got in touch and said, hey, I really want to poll my riding. I can pull the funding together between me and a handful of friends. We'll all put in $100, $200. If we get the money together and mail you a check, can you make it happen? And we were able to say yes. We set up this polling methodology so that we could scale it if the resources were there. And so some of the ridings, like Bruce Grayo and Sound, a couple of the Atlantic ridings, we were able to add in because there was resources there available to do it. So I hope that answers your question. We would have loved to have polled more places, and for anyone that's felt disappointed today, I'm sorry. We would have really loved to have polled every single riding that we thought might be a swing riding in Canada. We had to prioritise, and this is the list that we ended up with.
Thanks, Matthew. Just before we go to the next question, I'm going to ask you to go over the results for Etobicoke Lakeshore one more time. We're hearing from a few people that we missed the riding. I know that we did, in fact, poll it. So would you be able to talk us through that again?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sorry if I missed over one of them. Etobicoke Lakeshore is, and I'm hoping that the amazing people that are running our video have put up some little graphic with this now. Etobicoke Lakeshore, we polled it. It was a very, very close Liberal-Conservative race. We had the Liberals ahead by a whisker. Liberals with 40%, Conservatives with 38%, and the NDP with 9%. The Greens quite a way back with just 3%. So that's the results there, and sorry we missed it.
Awesome. Matthew, this is just going to turn into me interviewing you, just for a little bit. The next question is from Colvin. The question is, how do these polls deal with people who consistently choose undecided?
Yeah, so I mentioned that a little bit at the start. We've got two questions. First of all, we ask who they're planning to vote for, and I'm paraphrasing a bit. Second, we ask if they say they're undecided, we ask, is there a candidate you're leaning towards? So on that first round of questions, typically we'd have about 14%. It varies between riding, but on average about 14% of people would say I'm undecided. After the second question, half those people give us a response. So the completely undecided drops to about 7%. We've got those numbers for every riding. In the slide deck that we released today, it didn't include those. It would have just been too cluttered. But it's typically only around 7% once we've answered those two questions. There's always uncertainty in any kind of polling, but those are the kinds of numbers that we're dealing with this time.
Thanks, Matthew. Okay, I'm going to take the next question, which is from Joel. The question is, how will Leadnow choose which candidate is best to defeat the Conservative? Who will decide? And the simple answer to that is you will decide. In the vast majority of ridings across the country, in all 338, what we're doing at votetogether.ca is providing good local information about the riding that you live in, including the best information we have about who has the best shot at defeating the Conservative. So in almost every single riding, what we're providing is historic results, 2006, 2008, and 2011 results mapped onto new riding boundaries, as well as where the parties stand on the issues. Where local polling is available, either because somebody else has done it or because we've crowdfunded for it, we're also providing that. And what we're trying to give you is a sense of historic trends over time, as well as trends during this extremely long election period. So we're trying to give you as much information as possible so you can make a good decision on October 19th. It's really important to remember that no one has done this before. No one has ever compiled this much local information in one place, and we think you're smart. So we're trying to give you as much info as possible so that you can make up your own mind. That said, in some places where the Vote Together campaign has gained a lot of momentum, so places where we have thousands of vote pledges, where we have the strong local teams with the ability to actually get out the vote, we'll be running a community recommendation process in October. In two-way races, we'll be asking you if you are willing to, or if you'd like to recommend the candidate that has a shot at defeating the Conservatives. In three-way races, we'll be asking you which of the two candidates you'd like to recommend. If the community decides together to recommend a candidate, then we'll help you get out the vote for that candidate. But in the vast majority of the country, we aren't actually making a recommendation. We're giving you good local information so you can make up your own mind. Okay, Matthew, pitching it over to you for the next question.
Yeah, so there was a question which was asking, how did Leadnow get 2011 results for ridings that are new this election? That's a really good question. Elections Canada gave it to us. They've published what they actually did was they took the 2011 results, they broke it down by polling division, so the small areas within a riding, and they took those and then said, okay, this polling division is going to be in this riding, this polling division is going to be in that riding. I oversimplify it a bit, but basically they did that process of saying what would the 2011 results have been had the election been fought on these new riding boundaries. We actually also did that for 2006 and 2008 results. Ours it's a little bit less accurate. It's a hard thing to do, but the 2011 results that you'll find if you go to votetogether.ca are the official numbers from Elections Canada. So we've got a high degree of confidence in those when we're looking at ridings that are new this time. For anyone that wasn't aware of that, there's 30 new ridings this election, and a number of the riding boundaries have changed, even in places where the riding names have stayed the same. So that's where Daryl's question comes from.
Coming back to you, Matthew, but I'll read the question so people don't get tired of your excellent voice. John is wondering what it costs to poll.
It's a good question. It depends how many ridings you poll. If you were to go to a pollster and say, I just want to poll in this one riding, it would be a lot of money. On average, for our rounds of polling, it's going to be in the order of 2,000 to 2,500 per riding. So that obviously adds up quite significantly when you're trying to poll 31 ridings. We did manage to get a very good economy of scale. We worked with the pollster and a service provider that helps do the calls that try and drive the cost down, so that we could put in place a polling plan that would be able to scale up and get good value for money for our members. But it isn't cheap. It's at least 2,000 to 2,500 per riding.
Thanks, Matthew. So there's a question for me from Suzanne. The question is there other groups to coordinate on the election? We're doing a number of things. First, if you go to votetogether.ca and you look at a riding page where there's another group running that has a local team running canvassing efforts, a group like the Dogwood Initiative, or in BC in a number of ridings, or Ecology Ottawa and a couple of ridings in Ottawa, what we've done is listed their campaigns on the Vote Together site so that you have the option to volunteer with them in ridings that they're working in where we're working towards similar goals. We aren't directly coordinating with them, but we're trying to work in different ridings in order to maximize our impact. So in ridings where the Leadnow Vote Together campaign isn't active, but other groups are, we're driving people to those groups so that together as a progressive movement across the country, we're able to have as big an impact as possible on this crucial election. That question is bundled with a question about whether we'll be engaging directly with the leading candidate in NDP Liberal split ridings to coordinate canvassing efforts. We are actually working in ridings that are NDP Liberal splits. We're working in Conservative swing ridings where vote splitting between the opposition parties might lead to a Conservative victory. In ridings where we do recommend a candidate, we won't be coordinating with the parties, but we will be giving our volunteers an option to get out the vote for the candidate that is recommended on election day. Okay, Matthew, I think it's over to you. Oh, is it not? No, now you need to listen to me talk to myself. I think the next question is from Frank. Yes, people are nodding at me in this room. The question is, what do you do when the Liberal and NDP are evenly split and the Conservatives are ahead? Matthew, do you want to help me out here? I'm not sure I entirely...
So it's asking if we see the Conservatives ahead by a few points and the Liberals and NDP behind neck and neck, how are we going to deal with potentially trying to endorse a candidate or solve the vote split in that situation?
Well, so again, in the vast majority of places, we aren't actually recommending a candidate. In places that we are, if the riding is too close to call, we'll be providing good local information, but we won't be making a recommendation. In ridings where vote splitting could lead to a Conservative victory, and we have enough momentum to run a recommendation process, we'll be asking the community to decide. Do you want to add anything to that, Matthew? Nope. Okay. And it is back to you now.
Yeah. The next question is from Chris. He asks, what do you think of the other strategic voting websites that are around in this election? So a big part of why we set up this campaign, we looked at strategic voting efforts that had happened in the past, and we said, what's missing? And the big piece that's missing is two things. One, it's really good local riding information, and the second is on-the-ground organising. It's really not enough to just put up a site and kind of hope for the best, hope people go and see it and somehow vote. You've got to get them the best information on what's actually going on in their riding, and then you've got to organise around it. So we're doing both of those things as part of the Vote Together campaign. That's why we've got this local polling to try and do a better job than you can do with, for example, seat projections, which just take regional numbers and then try and somehow kind of apply that to figure out what's going on the ground in one riding. We know that doesn't take into account local context, and so that's why we're trying to do local riding polling in as many places as possible. And then in many ridings we're coupling that with on-the-ground organising. We've got teams going door to door, talking to people, signing them up, and building actually a large block in many ridings, thousands of voters that are going to be coming together to vote together as part of this initiative. So we see it as quite different than just putting up a website and hoping for the best, and we hope that what comes out of it is we have a big degree of impact.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. Our next question is from Lauren, who says, I would like to challenge listeners to this stream to donate to fund the next round of polls. How can I do that? Well, the answer is very simple. You can go to votetogether.ca and click on any donate button. If you'd like to, there are many of them, I promise you. If you would like to donate specifically to the pool of money that goes towards local polling, you can go to any riding page. Yours is probably the easiest to find. So go to votetogether.ca, enter your postal code, and midway down the page you'll see a button that says Donate for Local Polling. Click that and it will take you to a beautiful donation page that says Donate to fund local polling and Conservative swing ridings across Canada in big capital letters, and you can donate there. Okay, and I guess the next question is for me as well, from Devin. The question is there a reason that you didn't poll in Quebec? there is a reason we didn't poll in Quebec. There are very few Conservative swing ridings in Quebec. It's also part of the reason that a lot of our election campaign is not focused on Quebec. We're focusing in ridings across the country where vote splitting between the opposition parties could lead to a Conservative victory. So we've largely stayed out of Quebec, and we haven't polled there. Matthew, do you want to add anything to that? Okay, next question is for you.
Yeah, so Steve is asking, I'm concerned the groups that self-identify and send money for a local poll might be hijacking Leadnow's non-partisan position. We look at what the context is for the riding, and we're polling in places that we believe are Conservative swing ridings. If we do a poll in a riding, that information is neutral. So if a group of concerned citizens comes forward, they might themselves have a candidate they're hoping will be up in that poll. We don't selectively release any of the results, and the results that come out, they don't get a say in what happens to that. So essentially, we're happy to let groups of citizens, whatever their political persuasion, help us run polls in more ridings where we believe that might be useful information to voters. We're not selectively releasing it anyway. So if a group comes forward that wants to fund a poll, basically we don't see any harm in that.
Thanks, Matthew. Janice is asking, how can I find the polling information on your website? The easiest way to find the polling this current round of polling information is to go to votetogether.ca and scroll slightly down under where it says find your riding, and in big letters you'll see breaking, Vote Together releases 31 local polls. That will take you to a blog post that we put up today that gives you a bit of a top-line analysis of what we found in the polling, as well as the slide deck with the methodology and full results. And then if you scroll a little bit below that, it will also give you all of the ridings where we've done recent polling linked, so that you can click on them and check out the riding pages. And on the riding pages, you'll be able to see historic results, trends over time, as well as local polling.
So the next question is also from Steve. I don't know if it's the same Steve or a different question. It says, what about other methods? Will you post polling done by door-to-door on the internet? I'm actually not sure of any polling companies that do door-to-door polling. That would be exceptionally expensive to knock on enough doors to do that. We looked into some methods for doing internet-based polling. Basically, the problem is that no polling company that can do online polling has samples that are big enough in a specific riding. So we're not doing internet-based polls at this time. My hope is that over the next few years that might become something that's more feasible as the sort of the sample sizes that are available and the geographic targeting for that kind of thing improves. We did look into some options for that. Nothing was really feasible for the kind of local riding-specific polling that we wanted to do this time.
Okay, and Desmond is asking, can Leadnow do more to highlight where the safe ridings are in Canada? So for the Vote Together campaign, we are focused primarily on Conservative swing ridings. So these are ridings where the ridings where the outcome was close and it could be different this time. They're ridings where the Conservatives either won with a narrow margin in the last election, or ridings where one of the opposition parties won but the Conservatives came in close second. And because the Leadnow community knows that our democracy is broken, and because we know that in the last election the Conservatives got all of the power with 39% of the vote, we've collectively decided that we need to focus on the places where vote splitting could lead to a Conservative victory. So based on that analysis of what a swing riding is, we've designed our entire campaign around making it very, very clear where these 72 Conservative swings and these emerging battleground ridings are. So when you go to votetogether.ca and you scroll down all the way to the bottom, you'll see a map. All of the ridings in purple are the ones where the election will be won and lost, for those of us who care about defeating the Conservatives on October 19th. All of the other ridings are, Desmond, what I'm assuming you're calling safe ridings. Those are places where we're encouraging people to donate for local polling in Conservative swings, to make phone calls from home into Conservative swing ridings. The reason that we haven't drawn a ton of attention to those is because our primary goal with this campaign is defeating the Conservatives. That said, we've been saying over and over again that in those safe ridings, a big thing that we can do is raise the bar for all parties. So in those ridings, once we put the party platforms up, it'll be a really good place to go and see where the candidates and parties stand on the issues, so that you can vote for the candidate that has the position that you agree with most. Are we giving this one over to Matthew? Yes. Matthew, the question from Alana is, I'm concerned that Vote Together is already recommending candidates in many of the ridings. Has the recommendation process already happened?
No, the recommendation process has not already happened. The best thing to do to get information on the recommendation process as it happens is to make sure that you've gone to the VoteTogether.ca website, signed up with your email and postal code so that we know which riding you're in and how to get in touch with you. But it hasn't happened yet, and we're going to be rolling out more information about that process over the coming couple of weeks in the run-up to Election Day.
The question I have up on my screen is from me? Somebody with the same name. Nice to meet you, Amara. You have an awesome name. And also a really good question. The question is, can you recommend strategies to help convince partisan voters to vote strategically? Strategies. There's one thing that I know, and one thing that I've heard loud and clear from our supporters across the country, and it's that the vast majority of people across Canada want change on October 19th. And there are many ridings across the country where the vast majority of people can vote for change and still elect a Conservative. And if that happens in enough places, we can end up giving the Conservatives a false majority government once again. And I think that we can all agree that we don't want that. I'm just going to start choking. I think we can all agree that we don't want that. And a big part of our campaign is asking people to put aside their partisan interests that are focused on getting as many votes as possible and accidentally creating an outcome that many people don't want, and to vote together for change. Matthew, since that was the last question, I'm going to ask if you have anything to add to it.
Yeah, I'd add one little thing to that, which is that our work isn't going to be done on Election Day. In fact, our work's going to in many ways begin then. And one of the things that we've heard time and time again from the Leadnow community over the last 4 years is a deep desire for improvements to our democracy. One of the biggest pieces of that is going to be doing everything we can to try and get electoral reform, and it's really just a function of our extremely broken first past the post electoral system that lets these outcomes happen, and that means that we have to try and run these kinds of campaigns where we're asking people to vote strategically. I'd much rather not do that, and if we manage to change our voting system, we won't have to go back to partisans and say, actually, we want you to vote for somebody else because it's what makes sense here in your riding. People should be able to vote their conscience and vote for the party that they want to vote for, the ideas that they believe in. And really, we just see this campaign as being a stepping stone towards trying to change from a government that will never pass electoral reform to a different kind of government, so that we can get progress on reforming our democracy. So one of the arguments that I make when I talk to people who are very partisan is let's do everything we can this time. Let's change the government, and let's do everything we can afterwards to make sure that we never have to do this again. So that's one argument. It might work for you. I hope that the one thing we can all agree on is that we need to get a new government on October 20th, and then keep pushing on the issues, because we're going to have a lot of work to do.
Thanks, Matthew. Okay, I just want to let you know that there are almost 900 people watching right now. And there have been people coming and going, but at this very moment there are almost 900 of you. That's pretty cool. Thank you. Okay, there are 26 days left in this election campaign. I'm going to thank you so much for taking the time tonight to be here. And there are so many ways for you to get involved. I know many of you are the most involved folks in this campaign, but I'm still going to say that you should head over to VoteTogether.ca, where you can check out what's happening in your riding. Matthew said that he should probably be out knocking doors instead of talking to us right now, which is probably true for all of us. So if you go to votetogether.ca and put in your riding postal code, you'll be able to see where you can knock doors or see your next shifts for making phone calls from home. You can join one of our volunteer teams in a number of ways and help power the campaign. You can also donate for more local polling on the website. So check out the videos once you close this one on our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and you can help amplify the campaign throughout your networks. Finally, we heard from a few of you that you missed our epic David Suzuki video at the beginning. So we're going to close with that, and then we'll end the briefing. So thank you, have a good night, and I'm so excited that you're in this with us. I can't wait to see what we do together over the next 26 days.
To all of the people that are volunteering and involved in the campaign in the way that Leadnow is now pushing, thank you. Thank you for doing what is my job and the job of all Canadians. That is getting people out to take part in the democratic process and to make sure that the votes matter in a way that will affect the government and the future of our children. Thank you for taking the time and putting your body on the line by getting out at the grassroots.
To find out what's happening in your riding, go to votetogether.ca, enter your postal code, and sign up.